Hello everyone, welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, and entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you're joining us live, super happy to have you. If at any point during the show you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. I'll try to keep an eye on it as we go along. I have it up on my phone over here, so hopefully maybe we can kind of get a discussion going. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really does help with analytics and the algorithm and helping new users find the show and the channel. And please, if you haven't already, please subscribe. If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes in the description so you can kind of jump around as you please. We stream this show every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, same like I said before, please like this live stream if you can. And please subscribe. Again, it really would be a huge help. We're trying to grow the Cinema Mancuso community slowly but surely. We're about 180 subscribers. We're getting close to 200. So hopefully maybe we can get there in the next couple of weeks. Let me just grab a quick drink before we get started. This is a big boy. Okay. So let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. So total box office, domestically, was about $277 million. So that constitutes about an 86% jump from the previous weekend. And of course, this makes sense since we now have the biggest opening of the year. And one of the biggest openings of all time now. Not necessarily like top 5 or 10 by any means, but I believe it's the biggest R-rated film opening ever. Of course, I'm talking about Deadpool and Wolverine opening this past weekend at $205 million. It's the highest grossing, like I said, the biggest opening of the year so far, beating out Inside Out 2, which I think was like 150-ish, maybe a little bit less than that. And this was projected to make about 176 to 181. There were a few projections that were getting up closer to 200, but I think this is, even if it's just slightly, it went past that $200 million mark. So I think this exceeded everyone's expectations, and boy, did it need to do well, right? For Hollywood, for Marvel, for superhero films as a genre. So there's a lot of sighs of relief this Monday now in Hollywood. It opened in about 4,200 theaters, so this is a very impressive per theater average of about $49,000 per theater. And this brings its worldwide total to about $438 million off of just a $200 million budget. So this is already past that doubling the budget threshold. So this is already a financial success, and the reviews have been good. Fan reaction has been really, really good. I have yet to see it. I'm going to see it this Thursday. I've heard very polarizing things. I've heard from some people that it's like one of the best, like easily the best MCU movie in years. It's a great reset for the franchise. I've heard from a lot of other people that it's really just pandery fan service and there's not really a lot there. I've always been kind of mixed on the Deadpool films, so I'm excited to go see this movie just because I'm like, how am I going to feel about it? Because it's both another Deadpool movie, but it's also, because of the multiversal element, it's like completely different than any of the other ones, right? So it's going to be interesting. So my point with all of this is that, it was the biggest opening, and I'm anticipating this is going to end up being, if it can keep momentum week to week, that this will end up being either, if not the highest grossing film of the year, it's going to beat Inside Out 2, which is currently the highest grossing film of the year, right? Because it's already made almost $500 million worldwide in one weekend, right? So and again, unless it has a huge drop off in week 2, 3, 4, I see this going pretty far. Also opening, we have the Fabulous Four, which is kind of like, I don't even know what you would call it. Like, I call them like mom-core movies, right? And it's not just a gendered thing, because there's also like dad-core movies, but it's movies that are like primarily exist for moms and like middle-aged women to go see. It's like this, comedy with, Susan Sarandon, Bette Midler, Bruce Greenwood, Cheryl Lee Ralph. Like, these are, you know what I mean? Like, they're only in movies now to be in these kinds of movies, right? Opened pretty small, opened at number 8, only made just a little bit over $1 million for the weekend, and that's also its whole worldwide total as well, right? So this is a pretty small movie. There weren't really any projections for that, nor were there really projections for our number 10 spot here, Ryan, which is another Indian. I don't want to say Bollywood because I don't want to use that if that's not technically what this would be. But in any case, this is an Indian film. It made it very humble. It just squeaked in. Again, I've talked about this in weeks past. That the fact that we have 2 movies in the top 10 that made under $1 million for the weekend speaks to how much air the bigger movies take, right? So it's insane that at number 10 we have something that made less than $500,000 in the weekend, and then at number 1, 200 million, over 200 million, right? But this opened again pretty small. It didn't even open wide. It only opened at about 133 theaters. But this brings its worldwide total to about 9 million. I think if you convert the rupee into US dollars, and I think its budget was about 12 million. So it still has like a bit of a way to go before it like makes back its budget by any means. But it might be a little bit different. Those economics might be a little bit different if it's an Indian film, right? Continuing this week into their second weekends, we have Twisters, plural, bringing in just a little bit over 35 million. And this isn't awful by any means, but this is a little bit of a disappointment. The drop was a little bit bigger than I'm sure they would have liked. It dropped almost 57%, even though it added 19 theaters. Now, you can't really blame Twisters for this because again, it's second weekend. It's going up against Deadpool and Wolverine. Again, like look at that difference between their grosses. And if you want to think back to last week, so Twisters opened to about 80. So Deadpool and Wolverine basically doubled or tripled what Twisters made in its first weekend, right? So, this is definitely disappointing, but I think that Twisters is a crowd pleaser and a pretty uncontroversial crowd pleaser as opposed to like Deadpool and Wolverine. So I predict that despite this second weekend drop, I think it's going to hold for a long time because I think it offers something as like a disaster film, a fun disaster film as opposed to like A Quiet Place Day One, which is like pretty, what's the word? Like just draining in a way. Like it's like a very miserable film, and that doesn't mean it's bad. There's not necessarily a lot of levity. I think it's a quite good movie, but something like Twisters is just more fun, right? So I see that kind of still going strong. So this brings its domestic total to just under 155 million and its worldwide total to just over 221 million off of a roughly 175-ish million dollar budget. So again, it's crossed that initial threshold of making back the initial budget, but again, ideally we want to see it double that budget to account for all the marketing costs. So that's why you see it a little yellow there. Right now it's a 26% return. But ideally, we want to see 100% return to cross that doubling threshold. I think that was the only thing that's in its second weekend. So just looking at some other stuff in the top 5, we still have Despicable Me 4 in number 3, dropping from second to third, now in its fourth weekend, bringing in just a little over 14 million. This was about a 42% drop, so again, not awful by any means, but this has done very well, right? This brings its domestic total to about 291 million, and its worldwide total to about 678 million, off of just $100 million, right? So if you see all the way over to the right, that's like nearly a 600% return. Again, reinforcing that Illumination is really just a Minions machine at this point. Also, still in the top 5, of course, Inside Out 2. Still in the top 5 after this is its 7th weekend, so it's been out for almost 2 months now, only dropping from 3rd to 4th, bringing in just about a little over 8.3 million for the weekend. And again, still in like over 3,000 theaters. So this is again, I'm a very vocal minority about not being the biggest fan of Inside Out 1 or 2. So I'm really just frustrated with the lessons that Hollywood is going to take from the success of like Inside Out 2 and to an extent maybe Deadpool and Wolverine. But in any case, this has been very successful for Pixar and Disney, and again, I'm sure they're breathing a sigh of relief, right? Because this brings Inside Out 2's domestic total to about 613 million and its worldwide total to about 1.5 billion with a B off of a $200 million budget. So that's like, again, like a 650% return. That's insane, right? In addition, you know what else is doing quite well, all things considered, is Longlegs, the horror film from Neon. Neon, of course, the indie distributor, kind of like an A24 type. They are the ones who distributed Parasite, which, of course, went on to win Best Picture at the Oscars. This is now in its third weekend, dropped from 4th to 5th, so it's still in the top 5. And by a good margin. It's basically double. It made double of what came in 6th, A Quiet Place Day 1. And this brings Longlegs' domestic total to about 59 million, and then its worldwide total to about 67 million, off of just a $10 million budget. So it's not making as big of a profit in terms of just sheer dollars. But something like this proves that instead of making, one $200 million movie, why don't you make like 10, $20 million movies, right? Because this is, this is on par in terms of a percent return. This is on par with like a Despicable Me 4 and Inside Out 2. It's just not making as much literal money. But if you spread that out, then you hedge your bets. So it's paying off for the studios now with Deadpool and Wolverine and Despicable Me and Inside Out 2. But then when you have these really expensive movies that bomb, it's a bigger loss because you didn't hedge. It's all on one movie. So I've always been of the mind that you're better off. You can still have your $200 million movie, but that should be the exception that proves the rule, right? Couple other notes here. We still have, I mentioned it, Quiet Place Day 1, still in the top 10 after a month. It's in its 5th weekend now, dropping from 5th to 6th, bringing us a little over 3 million. This brings its domestic total to about 134 million, and a worldwide total to about 254 million, off of just a $67 million budget. So again, we're seeing a lot of profitable movies in this top 10 so far. Also still in the top 10 after 2 months, after 8 weekends, we have Bad Boys Ride or Die holding on for dear life onto its 7th place spot, bringing in just a little over, I think, what is it here, about 1.3 million, just a little bit under that. Only now in about, it dropped about, they took it out of about a little over 700 theaters, so it's only in about 1,000 theaters still. But this brings its domestic total to about 192 million, and its worldwide total to 395 million, off of just a $100 million budget. So Quiet Place and Bad Boys, not as profitable as those other films that are still in the top 5, but again, I would love to get a nearly 300% return on an investment, right? So it's, the box office is definitely healthy. It's just going to be interesting to see if we're gonna get to a place where the final year's number, the final box office numbers for 2024, are they comparable to pre-pandemic years, or are we still recovering? It's gonna be interesting to see kind of like how that all shakes up. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 1. So Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios have revealed that Robert Downey Jr., RDJ, will return to the MCU. But not as Iron Man, as a lot of people may have thought, but as Doctor Doom, the Fantastic Four villain. Notably, I don't believe this character is going to be appearing in the Fantastic Four movie. I believe the main villain of that is going to be Galactus, which is like another another Marvel villain for the Fantastic Four. But this announcement came as part of Marvel's San Diego Comic-Con presentation, where we got a lot of info about upcoming projects. So they kind of talked about Deadpool and Wolverine being so successful. They showed a lot off of the new Captain America movie with Anthony Mackie as the Falcon, or I guess now he's Captain America. That film, Captain America, Brave New World. They also talked a little bit more about the Fantastic Four film, like I mentioned. It now has an official title, The Fantastic Four, First Steps, and we actually got to see a little bit of footage that hasn't been released online, but I've seen some leaked, like people just filming on their phones and stuff. But most importantly is this Doom, focus here, right? So Avengers 5, which again was Avengers the Kang Dynasty, is now going to be Avengers Doomsday. It was rumored for a while that was the route they were going to go, that they were going to replace Kang with Doctor Doom. But now we have confirmation, right? I had talked about last week that the Russo brothers, who directed Winter Soldier and Civil War and Infinity War and Endgame, would be returning to the MCU to direct this and Avengers 6, which is Avengers Secret Wars. that's now been confirmed, right? They came out and they officially announced that, yes, they're returning to the franchise. We have some quotes here from the brother duo, Joe Russo, saying, quote, "When we directed Avengers Endgame, we really believed that it was the end for us in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That 4-movie run was incredible, and it left us creatively spent," end quote. And then, of course, their career didn't do quite so well, so I think now it's advantageous for both Marvel and the Russo brothers for them to come back. And Anthony Russo continues on stage saying, quote, "In the time since, through a very special story, Joe and I have come to potentially see a road forward with you," end quote. And it's, I think the Secret Wars angle is what intrigued them from interviews I've read, that they really like that comic book storyline, and they really wanted maybe to have a chance to adapt it, right? But then the big shock, because again, this all seemed kind of, like we already kind of knew this, or it had been rumored, and it's one of those rumors that we don't have a confirmation, but like the rumor, it just makes so much sense. It'd be weirder if it didn't happen, right? But then the shock was they announced that it's going to be Doomsday, and obviously it's going to be focusing on Doctor Doom, and they have all these people come out wearing Doctor Doom masks, and then all of a sudden one of them just kind of walks down, and, parts the wave of dooms and comes out, rips off the mask, and it's RDJ, right? And so Robert Downey Jr. is going to be playing a variant of the iconic villain from I guess another corner of the multiverse. With Downey saying, quote, "New mask, same task. What can I tell you? I like playing complicated characters," end quote. So again, like I was saying, this is all a replacement for Kang, right? So that was going to be the big angle. They'd been setting up Kang to be almost like a Thanos-level threat for the MCU, and that's where it was all building, to the point where his name was going to be in Avengers 5, the title of Avengers 5. But then, of course, a bunch of things happened, right? Audiences weren't latching onto Kang the way I think Marvel and Kevin Feige were hoping. And then, of course, all the issues with Jonathan Majors, and then Jonathan Majors gets fired, so then it becomes, are they going to recast him? Are they going to just somehow kind of make it so Kang isn't important anymore? So basically, because of all this, Feige and the rest of the creative team had to completely retool everything, right? And again, it makes sense that they're going with Doctor Doom now, right? There's an IGN article by Scott Coppola titled, quote, "Why Doctor Doom was the only choice for the MCU's new Thanos," end quote. And I have a little paragraph quote here from the author of that article, Scott Coppola, as he kind of explains himself, saying, quote, "When looking at which characters have already appeared in the MCU and what villains are left from the comics to adapt, there aren't really many more major threats left to bring in who could necessitate an Avengers-level team-up. There are only a handful of villains who are, quote-unquote, big enough for the event-sized films Marvel seems to want the Avengers movies to be," end quote. And I think that point's really well taken, that, there's only so many characters that you, without doing a lot of legwork and kind of reinventing the wheel, like reimagining a character, there's only so many characters that are already pre-built to be a great major villain that requires all the heroes to come team up, right? A lot of people say Doctor Doom is one of, if not the best Marvel villain, and it sucks just because we've never really had the Fantastic Four done well in film, so I know a lot of people are really excited, and I think while all of this is true, what people are saying and what this IGN writer, Scott Coppola, is saying, I think it also has to do with the fact that because the MCU is floundering, and I've talked about this on the show before in many other videos, that what is going to save the MCU is how they pull off Fantastic Four and X-Men. Or at least the characters and things surrounding those properties, right? Because those are the things that have been locked away out of reach for the MCU due to rights. And it's not only that, but those are two of the most popular Marvel properties. So if they're able to pull that off and create really, really strong films that resonate with people, the way the original X-Men films did, and the way that they wanted the Fantastic Four films to do, that could save the MCU. So it doesn't hurt to center your major multiverse crisis around the main villain of one of those properties, right? I think it doesn't necessarily, I think everything that we're talking about here, where it's like, who else would the villain be? That's all true, and it doesn't hurt that now the main villain is from one of those properties, so we inject some new life into the MCU, right? But kind of take a step back, it's also funny to see RDJ return to the MCU, right? You know, basically since Endgame, and he's like tried to become like a serious actor, even though he already always was. RDJ's a phenomenal actor when he has the material to work with, right? But basically his whole like Oscar campaign, awards campaign following his role in Oppenheimer was basically just him complaining that he had been like in Marvel jail for like a decade, right? And you know, Feige even suggested along the way that something like this would not happen, right? That they would not bring RDJ back to play Tony Stark, saying, quote, "We're going to keep that moment and not touch that moment again. We all worked very hard for many years to get to that, and we would never want to magically undo it in any way," end quote. So he's talking about the idea of bringing Tony Stark as Iron Man back through some weird multiversal thing. I think that's really smart, right? But, you know, RDJ, he won his Oscar. He probably decided, you know what? Fuck, you know, real movies. It's time to make some money, right? So the reaction, though, has been mixed, right? So when you watch this video of this announcement at Comic-Con, it seems like they blew the roof off the place. Like, the audience reaction was just overwhelmingly positive, right? But that's not always a great sample size because an audience at a Comic-Con presentation are self-selected diehard Marvel fans that are gonna spend lots of money and wait in long lines and sometimes travel to San Diego, right? So that makes so of course that audience is gonna react that way. The online reaction has more or less, I would say maybe a couple people, but it's been decidedly negative for a few reasons. So the main one is just that people feel like that it's lazy. It's just a lazy way to get people interested. So I have a couple quotes here from people on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. At Hawkgirl wrote, quote, "I don't even have words, but the way the MCU has completely reduced itself to cash grabs and nostalgia with no sense of creativity has to be studied," end quote. And furthermore, we have a quote here from at Small Putrick, Putrk, sorry. At Small Putrick says, quote, "I like how Kevin Feige wants the MCU to last for several decades, yet he wastes the most iconic Marvel villain of all time on something you would find on DeviantArt 14 years ago," end quote. For those of you too young to know about DeviantArt, DeviantArt was kind of like an art website where people like, you know, fan drawings of characters or stuff, and it didn't have to always do with pop culture, but that was like a big thing, people making like fan art of media properties, right? So a lot of people are just like, it feels like you know, people throw around the phrase creatively bankrupt, where it's like, we don't know what to do to improve the situation, so we're just gonna go back, right? And that's why I talked about my video last week about the Russo brothers maybe returning, is it's not necessarily an issue, because the Russo brothers films are some of, if not my favorite of the MCU, but it reflects a conservatism, not necessarily political conservatism, but a creative conservatism of, it's not worth rocking the boat, let's just do what we know worked before, right? So that's a big element. And then there's also, not as much stuff said about this, but I think this is worth mentioning, is, you know, the whitewashing of this character. So in the comics, Dr. Victor Von Doom, which is like his name, because of course in Marvel logic, your given name somehow prophesizes your eventual superpowered alter ego title, right? Because it always has to be just a little too clever. Victor Von Doom was a Romani character, right? Which of course is the oppressed group, you know, the kind of migrant group that kind of went throughout Europe and had been persecuted for centuries and millennia. And I'm not sure how many people knew that, especially given the film adaptations have never really leaned into that. But that's an important part of his character. So a lot of people are upset, and I think rightfully so, that, you know, we're finally getting, you know, well, not even finally, because we've gotten Fantastic Four movies, and we've gotten Doctor Doom, and I don't believe, you know, I haven't seen the one from 2015, but I'm going to try looking at it now. I don't think we've really ever gotten a version of this character that was Romani, right? That kind of fit that ethnic background. So I think a lot of people are disappointed that it's like we're doing this. So not only it's both politically conservative and creatively conservative. So instead of exploring this and giving a Romani actor the opportunity to shine and break out in a mainstream way, we're gonna make him white, and we're going back and we're having Robert Downey Jr. of all people play him, right? But you know how I kind of feel mixed about this, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but there's a great post by a user on Reddit, Silver Skywalker Saber, and they kind of capture the weird in-between feeling that I feel. And they said, quote, RDJ Doom is either the most creatively bankrupt decision ever, or it's going to be the coolest shit we've ever seen. Time will tell, end quote. Right? Like, for all we know, this is going to be like, maybe, for all we know, this is going to be the role Robert Downey Jr. is remembered for. Who knows, right? Like, this could be transformative, and he could turn into performance, and if the material's right and the film is good enough, this could be the thing he's remembered for, right? Or it could be literally the worst decision in, like, the past 25 years of Hollywood, right? But again, only, what's his name? Silver Skywalker Saber said, only time will tell, right? But again, it reflects Marvel's conservatism, because again, you know, the past couple of years have been focusing on new stories and characters, and that flopped financially and critically. But I don't know if it's because they were new stories and characters. I think just they weren't made very well. But again, they're turning back. They're going back to the well. They're bringing in the Russo brothers. They're bringing in Robert Downey Jr. But this is an interesting situation, and Kevin Feige alluded to this, not at Comic-Con, but maybe a couple of weeks or I think it was like a couple months back, just about the state of the MCU and how things have really gone downhill. You know, when he said what I'm about to say, he was doing it to do damage control, but I think there's some truth to this, that because of the financial and critical, you know, issues that the MCU has had since Endgame, the MCU is kind of somehow back to being an underdog, right? Like when it started. So maybe because it went so low that they kind of hit rock bottom in a way, maybe this is the best thing for the MCU, because it kind of shook them out of their apathy, corporate and creative apathy, and maybe they can salvage the situation and make something not only better than what it was going to be, but maybe better than everything that's come before, right? But of course, I'm being optimistic here. We really have no way of knowing until we actually see these movies. But looking at just this micro decision, forgetting the whitewashing of the character, you know, ignoring how you know, kind of desperate it reads as a corporate decision, I actually don't mind this, right? I've seen a lot of people point this out. You know, there is something thematically interesting about the idea that one version of Tony Stark saves the universe, and then another version of the character from another universe is the universe's worst enemy. We still don't have confirmation if he is playing Victor Von Doom, or if he is playing a Tony Stark variant that becomes Doctor Doom, which I believe was a storyline in the comics, like an Elseworld story where it's Tony Stark that becomes Doctor Doom, right? So we don't have any, but if it's that he's a variant of Tony Stark, that could be really thematically interesting, right? And of course, I'm not mad to see RDJ come back, because he's easily one of the best actors that has ever been in the MCU, or better yet, maybe not one of the best actors who was in the MCU, because there's been a lot of really great actors, but has turned in some of the best performances, right? Because sometimes you would get phenomenal actors, but due to the material or a poor direction, or even just not a lot of direction at all, they didn't really have the room to stretch their acting and you know, performance muscles. RDJ always felt like, regardless of the script and the director and the specific narrative at play, he always felt like he brought a naturalism and pathos to the character. So I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to say I'm mad that he's coming back, because he was one of the best actors in the MCU. So now we got him back. Now we have like a really great actor back in the franchise, right? It'll be interesting now, having, you know, played Iron Man for a decade. It'll be interesting to see him dig into a more villainous role, right? And again, this is more about, I'm more excited to see Robert Downey Jr. return, not Tony Stark, right? I really don't care about the character coming back. I just think it can only help the franchise to have an actor of his caliber back in the game. But then overall, I think the biggest issue of all that I haven't really seen too many people saying is that we don't have a reason to care. And what I mean by that is, multiverses work great when we're introduced to different versions of characters we already know. And of course, we, as a society, we know who Doctor Doom is, but we haven't had like an MCU, like a traditional MCU version of Doctor Doom. So it's hard to care about a multiversal alternate version of him, right? So it's kind of like you're putting the cart before the horse. You're trying to cash in on multiversal shenanigans before you've done the work in the Prime universe, right? But it was a very interesting announcement. Like, I remember, like, because this broke Saturday night or Saturday during the day, and I had already kind of more or less figured out what stories I was gonna be doing. And then this broke, and I was like, okay, I gotta change everything now. But I'm interested to see this. Just I think this is also, I think it was definitely a lot of work and cost them, Marvel, a lot of stress and money most importantly to them. But I think this is gonna make for better movies. The fact that they're gonna lean into Doctor Doom and Fantastic Four and the X-Men and all of that stuff. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Let's talk about story number 2. So Warner Brothers Discovery and Turner Broadcasting are suing the NBA, the National Basketball Association. What gives? This is a quote from their legal complaint saying, quote, "Given the NBA's unjustified rejection of our matching of a third-party offer, we have taken legal action to enforce our rights. We strongly believe this is not just our contractual right, but also in the best interest of fans who want to keep watching our industry-leading NBA content with the choice and flexibility we offer them through our widely distributed WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery, video-first distribution platforms, including TNT and Max." The complaint goes on further saying, quote, "TBS has a vested interest in maintaining these distribution rights and its carefully developed 40-year brand. Moreover, NBA telecast rights are a unique asset that cannot be replaced. Each NBA game is a one-of-a-kind live sporting event," end quote. So their complaint also notes that they've invested millions of dollars in adjacent programming like TNT's Inside the NBA, which features Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley pictured here. So what's the context of this? So I might be going off, maybe I should have reordered this story, right? You might have no idea what I'm talking about. So the context is that Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns Turner Broadcasting, which in turn, no pun intended, owns CNN, which owns TNT, TBS, things like that, right? TNT and TBS carry NBA games, right? Disney and Comcast also carry NBA games on like ABC and NBC. But it's a really important part of the Warner Brothers portfolio, right? And the New York Times notes that in the past couple of years, the relationship between Warner Brothers and the NBA has frayed, right? Going to the point where the CEO David Zaslav of Warner Brothers, who was brought in 2022, in this first year of him being the CEO, said, quote, "We don't need the NBA," end quote. So not a great public statement when you have a really important strategic partner in terms of content, right? So they currently have an agreement, though, right? This current 2024-2025 agreement entails Warner Brothers paying the NBA about $1.2 billion a year for the rights package to show these games on TV, right? This rights package includes at least 64 regular games, Thursday night doubleheader games, Tuesday night games, at least 30 playoff games, and 1 conference finals, right? So there's a lot that's part of this, right? And that's how everything was until, right? So this was like a story. This would be the inciting incident. Until this month, Amazon made an offer to the NBA to gain these rights, right? The total deal that the NBA would have with Amazon and Disney and Comcast combined would be worth about $77 billion over 11 years, right? And per the agreement that Warner Brothers already had, the NBA had to notify Warner Brothers of Amazon's offer, triggering a 5-day window for Warner Brothers to match the offer, right? So, it's like you have a chance to maintain, to keep this going. You have 5 days to pony up the money. Otherwise, we're going to go with Amazon. And according to Warner Brothers, they matched the offer. But then the NBA still rejected the proposal, right? Their argument was that the matching offer that Warner Brothers proposed didn't actually match Amazon's offer. And we have a quote here, but basically because Amazon was going to stream it on Prime Video, and the NBA, I guess, did the math, and they feel that more people would watch it on Prime Video because there's more Prime subscribers than would watch it on TNT or TBS or even Max if you were to stream it, right? But in this complaint, Warner Brothers directly references this kind of line of thinking and tries to debunk it, saying, quote, "The NBA has asserted that because Amazon proposed to distribute NBA games on its Prime Video platform, TBS could not match by telecasting the games on TNT and Max, citing Section C4 of the MRA, which I think is just the agreement. But the NBA is wrong. TBS properly matched the Amazon offer by agreeing to telecast the games on both TNT and Max." End quote. So they feel like, look, we did exactly as the contract provided. You are legally obligated to maintain this business relationship. You can't go with Amazon, right? And this was a story that had been brewing for weeks, and I kind of was ignoring it, just because I'm not a huge sports person. If you follow this show, right? But now that legal challenges are starting to be thrown around, that's when this started to really pique my interest, because of course the back and forth of the offers and the counter offers and the matching offers, of course that suggests an interest in live sports. But it's so important that they're willing to go to court over it, right? And that's really the main reason why I want to talk about this story, is that sports and live news, which we'll talk about actually in the next story, sports and live news, and maybe even just more sports, is really like the only thing keeping traditional linear broadcasting alive, right? With TV shows, people prefer being able to binge them or just have them on demand. If you want to watch Dexter, right, that's what my fiance Viviana, who's watching tonight, hi honey, if you're just watching this, you can watch it at any time on demand. You don't have to sit and wait until 8 o'clock on a Thursday night, right? But sports is by design a live event, right? There's very little value in watching a game that's already happened, even if you haven't watched it, right? Because especially if you know what ended up happening, the one of the allures of sports, from what people tell me, is that uncertainty. Like, you don't know what's going to happen, right? So that perfectly aligns with the business model of traditional linear broadcasting, right? And it brings in a lot of viewers, right? Because of that. The Wrap notes that the 2023 to 24 season of the NBA games brought in about 1.6 million viewers per game, right? Per game. So not only is that more viewers, which means more eyeballs on ads in the breaks, and that's how television networks make money, but it also helps drive interest and viewership for the network's other offerings. So if you're watching a basketball game on TBS, it goes to commercial. You're obviously going to see commercials from third parties like Coca-Cola or something, and then TBS will make money off of that. But TBS will also show you commercials for their own content, and if you see it enough time, it might pique your interest, then you watch that, and now you're a loyal viewer of that show and watching those ads, right? So it's a huge part of the business model, right? And this is true even if sports heads to streaming. You still have the live audience element, right? So you could still basically just broadcast it as if it was on regular TV. So even if it was on Amazon, which is a Prime Video, which is still on demand, when you go into the button to watch the game, it would still have ads, right? It would still be as if you're watching it on TV. It's just now easier. Everything's in one place for you, right? So, because it's still a captive audience watching something in real time, right? Again, you can't fast forward because there's really not a lot of value in taping a game, finding out what the score was, and then watching it, unless you're like really into the sport or into the team or something, right? And again, even ad-supported streaming, like regular streaming, how now there's like ad-supported tiers of Netflix and Disney Plus, and when you're watching stuff, there'll be breaks to watch ads. Even that can't guarantee massive viewership all at once, right? Because you might, what did we say, 1.6 million viewers per game. You might have 1.6 million people watch something on Disney Plus within a week or a month, but it's not all at once. So if you're a company and you want to do an ad campaign, This, again, something like a sporting event guarantees massive viewership all at once, right? And again, it's something that even as we switch to, streaming models, because of the nature of it being a live event, it's still going to have like that linear format like TV. And whoever can access the money fountain, that is televised sports, can help shore up the balance sheet during periods of industry instability, right? It's really valuable to have sports like a sports rights package as part of your media portfolio, so that if your movie studio isn't doing so hot, you still have a little bit of money still coming in from that very reliable source, right? And it's kind of in a lot of ways like Disney with its theme parks, right? That it's so diversified to the point of being a monopoly. The company's so diversified that if movies in general aren't doing well, even if Disney films are the most successful in a year, if the general box office is just down for everything, they have other things they can lean on. They can lean on television news. They can lean on sports. They can lean on the theme parks. So it's crucial for someone like Warner Brothers to maintain their ability to include this as part of their portfolio, because it just, for all of the reasons, you could sum up with one statement. It makes a shit ton of money. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. So let's talk about story number 3. So, again, as with all of the stories I do on this channel that are more about politics, I'm trying not to do this from a political angle. I'm trying to do it from like a media angle, right? And how it reflects the media and entertainment industry, right? So I want to talk today about Biden dropping out, which, not to get too political, he should have done January 21st, 2021, right? Everyone thought when they voted for him in 2020 that he was going to be a one-term president, that he would kind of gracefully step aside. And then he was like, I like being president. I've been trying to become president for 50 years. I don't want to stop this. This is great. But of course, not this past weekend, but the weekend before that, Joe Biden officially announced via a tweet, a post on X, because he had COVID, he wasn't feeling well, that he was dropping out of the presidential race. And the reason why I'm talking about this story is it shows, like I've been talking about with all these stories about Joe Biden's presidential campaign. It's like if I had a nickel for every time I did it, I would have 3 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird it happened 3 times. This story shows how valuable live television news still is, and the news media still is, right? So this announcement, I think this post, it was like 1:45 on that Sunday afternoon. From that afternoon till the evening, in one day, nearly 12 million viewers tuned into coverage last Sunday afternoon on all the different channels, right? So between 2 and 4 p.m., Fox beat out everyone else. Fox had a total audience in that 2-hour window from 2 to 4 of about 3.196 million people. CNN had just a little under 2 million. MSNBC was not far behind. ABC had about 1.3 million. CBS had 1.1. So, and notably, it didn't just have a high viewership. It was pretty plentiful when it came to the key demographic of 25 to 54-year-olds for advertisers, right? So Fox had about 564,000 viewers in that time frame. CNN had about 496. ABC had 313. And this is all in thousands, of course. MSNBC had about 280, and CBS had 244, right? And again, not only that, viewership climbed rapidly between 1:45 and 2 p.m. And I can speak to that. I had actually just gotten out of the shower, and I heard Vivian, my fiance, yell from the other room, "Biden dropped out!" And I went, "What?" So what did we do? We turned on the news. We don't have cable, but we have Max, which now they've rolled out CNN functionality. So we put on CNN, and we basically just threw it on. We just threw it on in the background for hours, right? And we were a captive audience, right? We even if I wasn't paying attention after maybe an hour or so, because at a certain point it was just like the same info and them just saying the same thing over and over, I was still listening So, if an ad came on, I would hear it, right? And I would imagine that was the experience of a lot of people, right? And again, I think it speaks to the value, if there is one. I think that moments like these reinforce, that these 24/7 cable news stations that really came into existence in the 80s and then the 90s with like CNN and MSNBC and Fox. 24/7 cable news stations are worth their weight in gold during such moments, right? Because during a moment like this, I wouldn't quite call it a crisis, but it's a big news event. You want constant access, right? People want to stay updated on what's going on. Twitter used to be really crucial for that, but of course it's diminished significantly. Just because there's less people on it, it's harder to trust what's on Twitter now. And then this isn't just Twitter, and this isn't recent, but it also doesn't help how our feeds are not algorithmically or sorted and not chronologically sorted. Like ideally, you could just have stuff like this, and then this, and then this in the order that they were posted. But unfortunately, what can you do, right? I believe I even read that basically in a 4-year span, cable news stations like a CNN or Fox are not profitable or not very profitable for about 3 of those 4 years. But then the election years get so much attention that it helps basically make up for those other 3 years, those slower years, right? There's still the issue, when you have constant access, doesn't mean you always have constant information, right? And this speaks to a larger issue with cable news that it really bothers me. But this has been a thing since the 80s, so it's not like I'm the first to say this, and nor do I think there's a simple solution. But a lot of cable news punditry is still snack food versus like a nutritious diet, right? Like reading an article, not because it's written. I'm not trying to, pit mediums against one another. But usually, actual reporting is more intellectually nutritious. Whereas, like I said, if you could see this on every channel, regardless of your political affiliation. You watch MSNBC, you watch CNN, you watch Fox. At least what we saw on CNN, they just kept circling the drain. It's like at a certain point, there's no new info. So they're just restating the facts, restating the same opinions and viewpoint over and over and over. And they're just circling the drain. And it basically, that's the spectrum kind of basically is on two extremes. So on one hand, they're either just regurgitating highly prepared talking points, because again, they're usually, most cable news pundits are essentially de facto political operatives, right? They basically, speak for whatever party they are aligned with, right? In a lot of ways, right? So you have that on one end, and that could get really just draining after just hearing the same kind of fake, phony talking point over and over and over. And then the other extreme is that they're just providing unprepared and empty remarks. Like there's just not a lot of substance to what they're saying, right? So that's the big issue. So it's like after a couple hours of having CNN on in the background, I was like, I gotta turn this off. Like I'm not getting anything out of this. It's just empty calories, right? But again, similarly, people, the death of TV and all this stuff, we've been talking about this forever. But again, in moments like this, it's sports and live news. And similarly, a few days later, on this past Wednesday, when Biden made his official speech dropping out, it also received high viewership. In fact, for his 11-minute address, it received across all the different networks 29 million viewers, 5 million of which were from that key 25 to 54 demographic, right? Obviously, there's no ads during the speech, but people want that coverage, even if it's just circling the drain. People want that coverage and opinion before and after the event, right? So the thing was at 8 o'clock, so people maybe turn on CNN or Fox at 7:30, listen to people talking about, well, here's what Biden's going to do, and here's why this is so blah, blah, blah. And then after the speech, people saying, who off the cuff are going to say, well, here's the 10 reasons why that was a great speech, or here's 8 reasons why that was the worst speech in American history, right? And so you're going to get ads in that part, right? So again, anchor events like a speech, like a football game, bring people in, and they'll sit through everything else, right? cable news just needs to switch to streaming. I think they just need to bite the bullet. Again, like I mentioned, I'm not saying they CNN flopped with their standalone streaming service. What was it, CNN Go or CNN Plus or whatever? I don't even remember what it was called. And it lasted for like a month, right? They need to the way they've done it, where they've integrated it into Max, and it's literally a tab, so it'll be like movies, TV shows, news. You click on news, and you have the complete CNN broadcast at your disposal. That's how you're going to keep this business model alive, by making it easily accessible for people, right? Again, we don't have cable. We've never had cable. Like I've had cable when I was a kid with my parents. I have never myself purchased cable. I'm not a cord cutter. I'm a cord never, right? But we could stream CNN on Max, right? And again, we could just throw it on. But all of this to say, like I've said many times on the show, it speaks to traditional television media's surprising yet continued relevance and value in American politics. We saw it with the debate and how that completely changed the narrative for Joe Biden that led to this moment. The reports of live television news' death have been greatly exaggerated. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 4. So the video game actors that are part of SAG-AFTRA, which is the Actors Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, and then I think the AFTRA is the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, or American Film, So SAG-AFTRA, they're going on strike, and you might be saying, "Wait, I have deja vu. I thought the actors already went on strike." Those were the on-screen movie TV actors. These are the video game actors or performers, right? Because some of them are voice actors, some of them are motion capture actors, and they're going on strike. So this is the first time that this segment of SAG is going on strike as it relates to video game work. It's the first time since the 2016 to 17 strike, which lasted almost a year. It was like from October 2016 to September 2017 or something. So we have a quote here from SAG's chief negotiator, Duncan Crabtree Ireland. If you followed the last year's SAG strike, you heard his name a lot. He was the chief negotiator then too. He said here, quote, "The video game industry generates billions of dollars in profit annually. The driving force behind that success is the creative people who design and create those games. That includes the SAG-AFTRA members who bring memorable and beloved game characters to life, and they deserve and demand the same fundamental protections as performers in film, television, streaming, and music. Fair compensation and the right of informed consent for the AI use of their faces, voices, and bodies. Frankly, it's stunning that these video game studios haven't learned anything from the lessons of last year, that our members can and will stand up and demand fair and equal treatment with respect to AI, and the public supports us in that," end quote. So the strike officially went into effect last Friday on the 26th, and it applies to about 2,500 members of SAGs. I think it's like 16,000. So that's about like an eighth, right? It's like 10 or 15% of the union. So again, the context of all this is the union had what is called the Interactive Media Agreement. They had an agreement with the major video game publishers and studios, and the current contract expired technically 2 years ago, but it was extended to continue. It allowed the union and the companies to continue negotiating, right? And Deadline notes that the bargaining and the negotiating has been on and off since then, right? The members of the union, SAG members, they authorized a strike back in September. So they basically gave the higher-ups of the union authorization to call for a strike if the negotiations go sour, right? And that's basically what ended up happening. So Fran Drescher, who's the president of SAG-AFTRA, of course you know her as the nanny, said here, quote, 18 months of negotiations have shown us that our employers are not interested in fair, reasonable AI protections, but rather flagrant exploitation. We refuse this paradigm. We will not leave any of our members behind or wait for sufficient protection any longer, end quote. So the company's being struck, right? That's what you call it when you're one of the companies that they're striking against you. Companies being struck include, I'm just going to read them just for the record. We got Activision Productions Incorporated, Blind Light LLC, Disney Character Voices Incorporated, Electronic Arts Productions Incorporated, Epic Games Incorporated, Formosa Interactive LLC, Insomniac Games Incorporated, Take-Two Productions Incorporated, VoiceWorks Productions Incorporated, and WB, as in Warner Brothers, WB Games Incorporated. And we have a quote here from the spokesperson for the companies that are involved with the interactive media agreement. The spokesperson, Audrey Cooling, said, quote, "We are disappointed the union has chosen to walk away when we are so close to a deal, and we remain prepared to resume negotiations. We have already found common ground on 24 out of 25 proposals, including historic wage increases and additional safety provisions. Our offer is directly responsive to SAG-AFTRA's concerns and extends meaningful AI protections that include requiring consent and fair compensation to all performers working under the IMA, the Interactive Media Agreement. These terms are among the strongest in the entertainment industry," end quote. So the stance that the companies are kind of taking is like, we met you on 24 of the 25. So you're not being fair, is their argument, right? And again, of course, like I mentioned, this follows SAG's strike, the film and TV actor strike from last year. And again, it focuses on similar issues, and those issues being, higher pay, better safety measures, and most importantly, that's different from the video game actor strike from a little less than a decade ago, is the protections from AI displacement, right? It's a major new consideration, and it's an existential threat to their profession, right? The projects finished or those started before August 25th, 2023 are not subject to the strike, right? Everything after that has been halted, right? All the games in development, at least the performance work. It won't be as disruptive as last year's strike, though, with the actors for a few reasons, right? Or maybe just the one reason. For better or for worse, games are not as dependent on actors, right? That being said, Kotaku notes that most modern games are fully voice acted, if not also motion captured, right? So there's a lot of performance involved, right? But they're not dependent on actors in the same way that a movie or a TV show is. Like, you can't have a movie or TV show without actors unless it's like a nature documentary or something, right? But video games you can have without actors, right? You could do that. And there's plenty of indie games and also just classic games that obviously didn't have any voice acting or motion capture. So maybe this period, kind of similarly during the actor strikes, it gave smaller indie films that were in compliance with the union, it gave them a little bit more breathing room to kind of maybe stand out. Maybe this could give smaller indie games a spotlight, right? But again, this is an existential threat for these actors because in gaming more than anything, it would probably be, it's probably been considered, and they're trying to implement it, having it so that they can just get an actor's voice and then just put in whatever the dialogue is and then just have the characters say whatever. And in an artistic way, removing the labor issues here, AI could actually be really valuable for gaming, right? So, if you have a game and you want it all to be fully voice acted, but that could take a lot of time. And that can sometimes limit, you have to think up of the line for an NPC to say, and then someone has to record it. So kind of there's an upper limit to how limitless the player's experience can be when interacting with these non-playable characters, right? So having AI voice clones that can then do text-to-speech in a compelling way that actually has a performance to it could be really valuable and really immersive, right? I'm not saying the actors are wrong to want these AI protections. Again, I feel, number one, just if you watch the show, I'm pretty far left. I'm very pro-union. So in a perfect world, it's like, we wouldn't be worried about AI displacing jobs or robotics displacing factory jobs if losing your job didn't mean that like you're gonna die because you're gonna starve and you can't pay food or for your rent or your mortgage or whatever. In a perfect world, we live in a society that has enough social programs that if you lose your job, you're not gonna die, right? So that's number one. But then also number two, you can do this where they basically clone your voice, and that way they can have infinite amount of dialogue options. Actors could provide the base voice. But then it's like if you're going to do that to compensate for the fact that it's not a lot of work, they get compensated like ridiculously well, right? We should be looking at the value of the results, not the amount of time put into it, right? I feel like this, why do we pay people who do the hardest things that none of us want to do? Why do we pay them the worst? Like, why is a janitor, not make way more? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, because we do it based off of, like, it's almost like the jobs are competing, and it's a shitty job, so it's like you're only going to take if you really need it, but if the shit gets backed up, that's a huge problem, right? So, that's how I feel about it. So it's like you can use as much artificial intelligence in your game development as you want, but then you got to compensate people better, because the money you're going to save, like, it shouldn't be to save you money. Like, any money that you would save, like, should go back into them, right? It should go back to the people that are actually making that money for you, right? And again, this just reflects how labor is just making a comeback in the United States, both in and out of the industry, right? So just within the industry, we have, like, Disneyland workers. Recently, one of the stories I was going to do this week, the team behind World of Warcraft is unionizing. And, of course, we had the SAG and writer strikes last summer, and was it spring into summer and then into the fall. So labor's making a big comeback. It's basically been dead since Ronald Reagan in the 80s, who, funnily enough, was the president of SAG in the, I think, late 50s, early 60s. But now it's making a comeback, and we're all the better for it. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 5 here. This one's disappointing. So Variety has released videos of Francis Ford Coppola, famous director, kissing extras on the set of his latest film, Megalopolis. These videos have surfaced, and again, it shows the director trying to kiss female extras, right? So this all has to do with allegations that were introduced back in May by a bombshell Guardian report, right? And these videos seem to corroborate the claims made in that report. So the original claims were that he, quote, tried to kiss some of the topless and scantily clad female extras and told them he was, quote, trying to get them in the mood. He would get up and do this during takes, during this, like, club scene, and he would ruin these takes, right? And a source from, I think this is a source from Variety, but this might be a source from the Guardian report, I'm not sure, saying, quote, I've worked with really important directors, and that behavior is uncommon. The most I've ever seen any director do is say something like, high energy, guys. I've never seen anyone on set, and this extends to a camera operator, so much as touch an actor, end quote. After multiple takes in doing this, Coppola basically grabbed a mic and said, quote, sorry if I come up to you and kiss you. Just know it's solely for my pleasure, end quote. And it seems to contradict the idea that this is to help set the scene, because they started to do damage control, right? When this report first came out, Coppola's team put out a statement saying, quote, there were 2 days when we shot a celebratory Studio 54-esque club scene where Francis walked around the set to establish the spirit of the scene by giving kind hugs and kisses on the cheek. I'm sorry, whenever you precede kisses with hugs, you say, like, hugs and kisses. That's intentional, because you're trying to make it sound like it's almost like a grandmother, just like giving you hugs and kisses, right? Anyway, so he's going around giving kind hugs and kisses on the cheek to the cast and background players. It was his way to help inspire and establish the club atmosphere, which was so important to the film. I was never aware of any complaints of harassment or ill behavior during the course of the project, end quote. And I just have a fundamental problem with that logic. I haven't seen the film, so I don't know what the context of the scene is. But Studio 54 was a debaucherous club. There was no hugs and kisses, so I find that strange. And also, furthermore, how exactly does an 85-year-old man, who's essentially your boss, who has power over you, kissing you on the cheek, set the mood? Right? I just don't understand. And sources for Variety, claim that Coppola acted with, quote-unquote, impunity on set, right? He financed the entire $120 million budget by himself. And, a source for Variety kind of put it best here, saying, quote, because Coppola funded it, there was no HR department to keep things in check. Who were they supposed to talk to? Complain to Coppola and report Coppola to himself, end quote? I think that's a pretty great kind of assessment of that, is like, when there's a weird power dynamic with that, there's no checks and balances, things can sometimes veer into inappropriate, right? There were intimacy coordinators for the film, Samantha McDonald and Ashley Anderson, but notably they were not asked to attend on this day. And McDonald said, quote, "I can't really speak to the reason why they chose to bring us in when they did and not when they didn't," end quote. Because there are like some sex scenes in the film that they were brought on for. So overall, this is disappointing. And this just speaks to a larger issue. I think I've talked about the Me Too movement on the channel, specifically when we talked about Harvey Weinstein's New York conviction getting overturned and him getting potentially released. And the Me Too movement was so critical for just shaking normal people, particularly men, such as myself, making them more aware and wake up to the full breadth of what women have to go through and face in social environments and professional environments. But then there was this weird kind of thing where it was either, are you good or are you bad? Have you been canceled or have you not been canceled? And I don't say this to say, oh, we're not being fair to people, we're just canceling them. No, a lot of these people deserve to be quote-unquote canceled. But rather, I would argue that there's like a spectrum. It's not to justify or excuse any behavior, but there's like different levels of that. So like someone like Harvey Weinstein is way different than someone like Aziz Ansari, right? Who I feel like was like the most unfairly attacked. What he did was not cool. Basically, if you don't know about Aziz Ansari, he basically had a woman come over and he was just being a little bit more touchy, but they were hooking up and he was just a little bit more touchy than she wanted, and she just didn't have a good time, and it was a really bad experience for her. That's really bad. I'm not saying he's like the saint, like what he did was nothing wrong, but there's a difference between being an asshole and being a predator, right? And I feel like Francis Ford Coppola, if you were to put him on the spectrum, is closer to that Aziz Ansari than a Harvey Weinstein. He's not this awful person. This is definitely not okay. And that's where I really want to be clear here. I'm not excusing this in any way, shape, or form. It's definitely not okay. And again, like I said, it reflects a larger issue in Hollywood and frankly, business in general, when one person, it's often an older man, just has too much control with no oversight, right? And part of me is almost, and maybe this is naive of me, I'm not even sure if he really believes what he did was wrong. Like, I know Harvey Weinstein, he knows what he did was wrong. He just didn't care. I'm not sure if Coppola knows that what he did was inappropriate, right? He told the New York, like when this first kind of came out, he told the New York Times that one of the girls that he kissed on the cheek, that he knew her since she was 9, and it was like she was a family friend, and we took a picture together. Which, sidebar, is that supposed to make it better this woman I knew when she was 9, all the way back to when she was a little girl, I'm going around kissing her, and I've casted her in my movie to be like a scantily clad, if not topless, extra. So that's weird in its own way. But again, it's like, he's just like, oh, well, I was just going around trying to set the mood or whatever. Maybe it's just because he's Italian. Are they more? I'm Italian. Are we more touchy-feely? And I don't know. So the whole thing is just disappointing and it's inappropriate. Full stop. But it'll be interesting to see if this really impacts the release of Megalopolis coming out in September. And he better hope it doesn't, because, like I said, he self-financed this whole thing. So if this bombs, it's gonna. But I think at this point he's just resigned himself. Like, he doesn't really care about the money. Like, he's old. He has a lot of money. He doesn't really care about the money at this point. Let me just grab a quick drink here. Okay, so taking a look ahead at the films coming up this weekend, we have Trap, the new M. Night Shyamalan movie. It's about, I guess, like a serial killer of some kind, going to like a concert with his daughter, and then he realizes that the whole concert's like a sting to get him. So it's like basically a thriller of him trying to be creative and like get out of the situation. I'm a huge M. Night Shyamalan defender. Not all of them, but I love his movies. Like, I feel like 4 of his movies I love, including the ones a lot of people don't like. Like, I really like The Village, and I really like Signs. So I'm very excited to see this. The trailer has a lot of, it's got a juice. Like, when I watch the trailer, I'm just like, just this trailer is entertaining. Like, when it comes on at the movie theater, I get really excited just to watch the trailer. It's looking to make about 20 to 24 million. Small opening, but I haven't looked at the budget, but I can't imagine it was super expensive. So that's kind of what's leading the pack right now for next weekend. And then also, this is the strangest movie that has ever been conceived by Hollywood. A live-action Harold and the Purple Crayon live-action adaptation with an adult man, Zachary Levi, playing Harold. It feels like it was written 20 years ago, and they just finally got the funding together to make it. It sounded awful, and then I watched the trailer, and I was like, oh, it's even worse than I thought it was going to be. It's tracking to only open to about 7 to 11 million, so not very much at all. And rightfully so, because it looks like a pile of horseshit. Okay, just want to give a few quick plugs before we wrap up. So, of course, this isn't my only YouTube channel. I have a sister channel called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment in a video essay format. The video I have up now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using these two kind of cartoon versions of myself, this older and younger version of myself. It would really be a huge help if you could go check out that video, give it a like, go subscribe. You can find the link in the description down below. Also want to give a quick plug to the podcast I do with my fiancée Viviana called Now That's Why I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This past Friday, we just started our season on Star Wars, which is exciting. We just released our episode on the original Star Wars this upcoming Friday. Very excited. We're going to be covering the Star Wars Holiday Special. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us in the description down below as well. And then finally, I want to give a quick plug to CinemaQ. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I cover, where I write written reviews for new movies coming out. It really would be a huge help if you could go check that out, maybe subscribe, check out a few of the reviews, leave a nasty comment about how everything I said is wrong. Whatever you want to do. Again, you can find the link in the description below. You can also just go to your search bar and type in cinemanqso.substack.com. That's it for this week. Thank you all so much for joining. If you haven't already, please like this live stream, share it with your friends, smash that subscribe button, bludgeon that subscribe button. Until next week, peace out, guys. Later.